Hello and welcome to this International Conference on Men's Issues 2020 special edition of Gender Matters with your hosts, me, Elizabeth Hobson, and Mike Buchanan, the leader and founder of the political party Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them, respectively. Our guest today is an icon, and Mike and I will be lucky enough to talk to him not once but twice during ICMI20. Warren Farrell has been working to help men and boys and the women who love them for as long as anyone currently living. He's spurred many into similar action, including Paul Elam, and he's done it with an uncommon grace and tenderness that is magnetic. His history is varied and fascinating, and I hope we'll hear about that from the horse's mouth during this conversation. Warren's latest book, The Boy Crisis, was co-written with John Gray. To my mind, the book is essential reading or listening because Warren has narrated an audio version. I love the book so much I have both versions. So Warren, what is the evidence for the boy crisis in the areas of mental health, physical health, and economic health, and what are the causes?
Yes, well, the evidence is really in 56 of the largest developed nations. Boys are falling behind, for example, academically in every subject, but especially in reading and writing. And as you probably would guess, reading and writing are the two biggest predictors of either success or failure. And so one of the questions is, why in the 56 developed nations? And what happened in developed nations is that there was enough in the middle and upper middle class, especially, there was enough ability to survive that the laws didn't have to be so strict about divorce and about family and marriage. And so there was more permission in the developed nations for divorce. And that led to divorce, meaning that usually women had the right to the children and men had to fight for the children. And that led to children being without their dads very frequently. And that had, and as I did the research for the boy crisis, I found that there were more than 50 different developmental problems that boys and girls had. Boys and girls both have most of the same problems when they don't have father involvement, but boys have them much more intensely because they don't have a male role model, and we have much less much less social permission to express our feelings. So few people know what's going on with us, and we often act out when we're hurt. Hurt boys often hurt others, and so we then pay attention to the hurt that they do as opposed to the hurt that they're feeling. And so that was happening in all 56 developed nations. And then another thing that was happening is there was more permission for not only divorce, but for women to have children without being married. Now you might take a sort of say, well, some people are in favor of marriage, some people are opposed to marriage. But what I found out was that that when women had children without being married, the relationship only lasted an average of about 3 years. And the father had contact with the children an average of only 4 years. And so as the children felt abandoned by the father, that had a deep psychological impact, much more than I would ever have suspected before I started the research for the boy crisis. I have become much more understanding of the importance of family and the importance of marriage and the importance of fathers as I went through 14 years of doing the research, and just the evidence just piled up to be so overwhelming. And so I gave you an example of academic health where that was important. Mental health, the single biggest predictor of suicide is dad deprivation. A huge predictor of opioid addiction, of addiction to drugs in general, dying from an overdose of opioids, a huge predictor of not doing well in school and dropping out of high school. Boys who drop out of high school have in the US and the UK more than a 20% likelihood of being unemployed before COVID. And so when in the United States before COVID, the unemployment rate was 3.8%, now it was over 20% among boys in their 20s who had dropped out of high school. So you get some sense of that as being both an educational disadvantage, but also an economic disadvantage. But more importantly, maybe than an economic disadvantage, is that boys who don't have jobs and don't have aspirations are often boys whose testosterone starts getting channeled in a destructive way rather than a constructive way. And so one of the things that shocked me is when I had run for governor of California, I spoke to a number of prison populations. And in the prison populations, I spoke to the 93% of the prisoners were men, and I spoke to all male audiences. And I was talking about the importance of dads. And in each prison population that I spoke with, not a single exception, men came up to me afterwards, tough men with tattoos on their arms, but tears in their eyes, saying to me, I always thought the best place for me is prison because I've done such a lousy job with my life. I didn't want my I was ashamed of being with my children and with my wife. What you've pointed out to me is how useful I can be to my kids, and the fact that I can help prevent my kids from ever doing making the mistakes that I made that led to prison. And so these, and over again, when I heard that, it was just like, I saw how when men are called to purpose, as they were in every generation's war, in each generation's war, men were willing to die so that their country would not be ruled by Nazis or some equivalent thereof. And so when we say to men, you are needed, and instead of having father warriors in which we train men to kill and be killed, we need to be calling forth father warriors in which men are trained to love and be loved, and have that privilege of loving and being loved. And so these were some of the things I began to start seeing as I submitted to my publisher for the boy crisis originally 10 causes of the boy crisis. And I started examining these 10 causes. And then I started finding out that, well, male teachers were an important contributor. But if the boys or girls had a father at home, the male teachers were positive, but not crucial. And so that the presence of the father was the hub cause. The others were spokes, the others were supplements, the others were compensations for the lack of father. And when I met with the White House, I called for them to create a male teacher corps, to give men free education in exchange for committing to serve 2 years as teachers. And these should not be men just like me. I'm sort of a nurturer, connector type of man. But they should be also traditional men. So every boy has a role model that he can feel identifies with his core personality. We don't need to remake boys. We need to discover what's inside of them, their unique personalities. And then once we discover their unique personalities, we need to give them social permission to be their unique personality. And so we do need to remake the straitjacket of masculinity that we've traditionally brought boys up in, and provide many opportunities for boys to be much more flexible. But we have to be careful not to stuff a new definition of masculinity down every boy's throat, because boys, like girls, are different.
Absolutely. That's really, really interesting. I wonder, with regards to the marriage question, something that occurs to me with, the outcomes being so much more positive when there is, that contract. Mm-hmm. I wonder whether it's actually because, I think, well, who is getting married? And I think a large proportion of those people are, faithful people, religious people. And so the fact that they have the support network of whatever faith community they're in, and, the fact that as far as they're concerned, they're married in the eyes of God, and that there is a much bigger taboo against separation for them. So, I wonder, what do you think on that? Because, what I'm saying is that I'm not convinced that if we just encouraged more people to get married, that would be that helpful.
Mm-hmm. The impact of faith is somewhat like the impact of male teachers, meaning that there is it's a positive. and it contributes well, but it's not as important in terms of variables. There's a fairly high percentage of divorces in faith-based communities, and there's some statistics on both sides of that. But where faith-based communities are absolutely essential is when, ironically, they're very positive in marriage families where you take a child to church and you start talking about the ethics and the morality and you give that child an extra layer of support in not only having his father but God the Father. That is very important. I'll give another example of that. I spoke in Bedford-Stuy, which is the poorest community in the United States, in Brooklyn, New York. And it was to the St. Paul's Baptist Church. And there were about 1,000 100% African-American audience. And in fact, I go out from the, as you probably may have seen, that I never speak behind podiums for very long. And so I go out in front of the podium and I turn back and there's a Black Jesus that was on the podium. And so afterwards, the Reverend Jerry Youngblood takes me back to behind the church, and we sit down with 25 boys. It turns out that 20 of those boys have been in prison. So one of them mentioned, if it wasn't for my faith in God and my faith in Jesus Christ as Savior, and the work of the wonderful pastor here and his commitment to bringing boys together and talking with each other, if it wasn't for that, I would still be doing the things that I was doing that led me to this prison, that led me to prison. I would still be in prison, but I'd have an extra amount of sentence that I'd have to be committed to, because it would have been one more time that I had screwed it up. And so I said, well, is that true of the rest of the boys? So remember, 20 out of these 25 boys had been to prison. So I went around to each of the 20 that had been to prison, and the number that said that their belief in God and Christ as Savior was crucial to them not being doing the things that led them to prison in the past was 20 out of 20. And so it really gave me a sense of the power, both of the belief in God, but also of the work that a committed minister or pastor does. And what I would really, and I just spoke yesterday to the Christian Men's Network in the United States, and one of the things I really encourage is for ministers and pastors and no matter what religious faith you are, for you not only to talk about the importance of a boy being a father, but also to talk about the importance have the boys in a group which is confidential with boys their own age, and have them talk about how the mask of masculinity, have them write on a piece of paper, what are the ways that they try to come across to other boys and other people. And then on the back, what are their real hurts and pains and wounds and the things that they don't let other boys see. And when boys see that every boy in that group has a facade or a mask of masculinity, and then underneath that facade, they have hurts and pains and fears and things of feeling inadequate, that it frees the boys to be able to say, wow, I can be vulnerable because every boy will identify with this. I'm not like a strange loser. And so it's important that the faith-based community have a good male role model, an involved male role model, a male role model who doesn't just speak and lecture, but who takes each boy aside and talks to him about the gifts that he feels that he has, the special feelings that he can evoke and contribute to the world, and then bring them together in groups of peers so that they can feel comfortable talking with each other. And then last of all, to make sure that group is 100% confidential, that you are kicked out of that group if you talk to anybody else about the feelings, the vulnerabilities that somebody else in that group said. And so those are ways that faith-based communities can be so crucial to boys with fathers, but especially to boys without fathers, because when boys go from dad-deprived homes to male teacher-deprived schools, and then we say to them, Well, why don't you, become a wonderful man? Well, what is a wonderful man? There's been no wonderful man for him to model. So his vulnerability to drug dealers, gang leaders who will take him in and give him a false sense of family. And Hitler Youth knew this. Hitler Youth specialized in focusing on dad-deprived boys. They knew that the dad-deprived boys would need a strong leader. And so they were able to take the testosterone of masculinity and channel it destructively.
Warren, hello, and thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's a great honor for us. I too greatly enjoyed your book.
Oh, thank you.
I wonder if you could tell us exactly what is there about father involvement that helps both boys and girls develop more optimally, and put another way, what do fathers do that is different from what mothers do?
Yeah, this is really an important question because most dads don't know the answer to that question. And the ones that know the answer to that question don't know how to explain it very well to the moms, and moms can't hear what dads don't say. And so there's about, in the Boy Crisis book, I outlined about 9 significant differences between dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting. And the children that did the best, I found, had what I called checks and balance parenting, where both the mom's propensity to nurture and inspire and protect was balanced with the dad's propensities to do some of the following. And so I'll give you an example of the following. A dad might say, okay, kids, time to roughhouse. I'm going to take the 3 of you and I'm going to throw you on the couch. And now it's your turn to jump on my back and try to pin me down before I pin you down. Okay, Dad, great. Now mom's looking on and thinking, oh my God, I feel like I have just one more child to monitor here. But she's trying to say, she's saying to herself, but don't be, controlling. The kids look like they're having fun, and try not to take over and spoil their fun. You'll only be looked at as a spoil sport. Okay, but on the other hand, I'm feeling inside of myself that sooner or later somebody's going to get hurt. Well, it turns out mom's only about 99% likely to be right. And sooner or later the kids get hurt. And mom says, she has 2 feelings going on inside of her. One is feeling guilty now that she didn't interfere before and follow her intuition and stop this before one of the kids got hurt. And on the other hand, she's saying, okay, finally, Dad, this child will get it and stop the roughhousing. But in fact, Dad doesn't get it. And not only doesn't stop the roughhousing, but just says something like, Jimmy, it's not okay for you to stick your elbow in your sister's eye. And if you do that again, we're going to stop the roughhousing. Okay, Dad, no problem. And so then the kids go back and now, and they return to the roughhousing and to mom's, chagrin. And Dad is saying, and the kids though are experiencing now what psychologists call emotional intelligence under fire. And meaning that when you are excited and carried away by the need to win, you forget all your promises to not, elbow your sister out of the way, your brother out of the way. And so they forget it. And so then Dad says, okay, you pushed your brother too hard. We're going to stop the roughhousing. Oh, Dad, I'm sorry, we shouldn't do that. Yes, we agree. Let us have another chance. No, you had that chance. We'll do the roughhousing again tomorrow night, but no more tonight. And mom's going, what? Twice in a row? You saw that the kids ended up getting hurt and you were now scheduling another time to do it tomorrow? It's like, he's hopeless. But Dad, without knowing this consciously, but unwittingly doing it, is now scheduled this next night. And it's the next night that the payoff comes. Because now he repeats the same thing about you can't push your sister or brother too hard, et cetera. And now the kids realize that if they do that, they're going to lose the roughhousing. How do they know that? Because last night they lost the roughhousing. So as the boundary enforcement that Dad did the night before, and then giving the children another chance and knowing that Dad wasn't fooling, that now makes the need to not be inconsiderate of their sisters and brothers' needs, it makes it viable for them to say that's worth so much because we're going to lose the roughhousing. So what are the kids learning? They're learning first empathy, which is that somebody beside you has needs, and you are also responsible not only for understanding those needs, but paying attention to those needs by not just putting your needs above them. Number two, they're learning the difference between being assertive versus aggressive. What's too much? Number three, they're learning, most important, postponed gratification. Outside of academia, postponed gratification is the single biggest predictor of success or failure. How are they learning postponed gratification? Immediate gratification is pushing their brother and sister aside. Postponed gratification is not pushing their brother and sister aside so that they can get what they want, which is the more roughhousing. And so now those kids go to school. And so with postponed gratification and the ability to think of other people's needs and the distinctions between assertiveness and aggressiveness being clear to them, they develop friends because friends want people who think of somebody besides themselves. And they start doing better in school or in sports or in whatever musical talent that they have because they have the discipline to play that piano every day or to practice in gymnastics to get to the Olympics and give up other things. That takes all that takes is postponed gratification as it does to finish your homework so that rather than be distracted by a text that's incoming and an invitation to play a video game. And so then those boys and girls start developing good friendships in school because kids like people who think of other people. And so they feel more motivated because of the social approval that they're receiving. They're receiving approval from teachers. They're receiving approval from their parents. Their parents are talking about them in proud ways. They have a reason to live, the reason to continue continuing that process. As opposed to the children that don't learn that, they start withdrawing. The mom is usually very good about encouraging the boy or girl to say, sweetie, you're really good at gymnastics or sports or whatever, or at academics. You should really focus on that. And the children start to pursue their dream, but they can't pursue their dream because they don't have the discipline. They don't have the postponed gratification. So they fail at that dream. So they try another dream and they fail at that. And sooner or later, they become afraid to dream. And so they start withdrawing into video games, into drugs, into addictions, into destructive behaviors that give them attention. And in the worst case scenarios, suicide or things like mass shootings, ISIS, becoming an ISIS recruit, becoming a criminal. And when I say that, those are not just passing words. As you know from the Boy Crisis book, boys who hurt us are boys who have hurt. And so about 85% of the prison population is not just males, but dad-deprived males. About 90% of the ISIS recruits are dad-deprived children, both males and females, predominantly males. And the mass shooters in the United States in the 21st century, there's 5 mass shooters that have killed 10 or more people. Every single one of them has been a dad-deprived boy. And so you can get a sense of the enormous impact that boys who are dad deprived hurt. And those are the boys who are far more likely to hurt us. The cost of the United States, when I calculated it, of cleaning up the mess of dad deprivation exceeds $1 trillion a year. That was a conservative estimate on my part. And so you get a sense of the more that you deprive the family of their dad, the more you increase the expenses of government and the size of government and the controlling of government.
Can I just make one point there, Warren, that fatherlessness, of course, is sometimes something of a time bomb psychologically. I'm thinking there of the Las Vegas shooter who had been fatherless, but he was what, in his mid-50s or 60s, somewhere in that kind of age. So this was brewing in him for decades.
Yes, it was brewing him in for decades, and the person's name is Stephen Paddock. He killed more than 50 people. And here's the background of Stephen Paddock. His father was a brilliant man who had been in prison. And so Stephen was really distraught that he didn't have a dad involvement. And then, then after escaping from prison twice, they put his father into a maximum security prison. It was about 2 months before his father was allowed to, his term would be up and he would be able to return to Stephen, his son. And instead of doing that, he was such a genius, he figured out a way of escaping from this maximum security prison. Stephen, according to all reports of mother and neighbors, was totally distraught. And so what he planned, and he did, now the rest of this, I'm telling you facts, but I'm giving you reasons that are my interpretation, so feel free to argue with them. The facts are, he then began to plan a mass shooting, which would be the biggest mass shooting ever, and kill more than 50 people and injure some 500. And in the planning of this, I believe what he was saying to his dad, Dad, I am your son. I am like you. I am also a genius. I am worthy of your attention. I will get the news and the headlines, and you will see your son, who is as brilliant as you are, and like you. And then also, Dad, why did you choose to escape prison and therefore never be able to return to me because you're always being hunted after rather than come to me? And I see that Stephen Paddock is a tragic example of a boy who has hurt and therefore hurts us. And I feel just when you see people, male or female, who are angry, who are hurt, people that we call haters, I beg of you, look at the vulnerability. Anger is vulnerability's mask. And that's especially the way it manifests in boys, because girls have more permission to talk with other girls about their anger and their hurts and their fears. And when they talk with other girls about breaking up in a relationship, for example, the other girls will say to them, you know, I think you're worthy of somebody much finer than that boy. They support other girls doing that. If Mike and I were having a breakup in a relationship when we were normal, the type of masculine guys, you know, we would listen to each other for about 30 seconds and then sort of roll our eyes and say, okay, let's talk about, who won the soccer game last night, or, that type of thing. Or if we were at work and we talked about this, and we were now considered for a promotion at work, I might say, Mike's been having a lot of trouble in his relationships. I don't think we should promote him yet. He's preoccupied with that. And so what men learn talking to other men is that it doesn't pay to share up your feelings. What women learn talking to other women is that it does pay. They get emotional support before they get advice. Men give advice before we give emotional support most of the time.
So I have recently separated from my partner of 13 years, and we have 2 young sons. We value each other's roles, and so we'll be sharing custody equally. But I wonder what advice you might have for single mothers like me, and also those whose children don't have a father active in their lives.
Yes. Okay, really good. First of all, I'm very sorry to hear that, Elizabeth. That's the pain of loving somebody and having children with them and having a future in your mind that will be forever, and being willing to care so much for them that you'd give up your life for them, and then having a divorce occur is really deeply sad. So my heart goes out to you.
Thank you.
So there's a number of things that I feel are important. Number one is for the last 30 years, I've been doing couples communication courses because I found that most divorces occur from the inability of all human beings. The Achilles heel of all human beings is our inability to hear personal criticism without becoming defensive. And so, and this is about equal for males and females. It's as equal for the gay couples that I've worked with as it is for straight couples. Everyone is biologically implanted with a fear of being criticized by people they love. The reason for this is that historically, if you were criticized by somebody, it was a potential enemy. And you had to get up your defenses to defend against the enemy or kill the enemy before the enemy killed you. And so the number one thing that all couples can do, whether together or separate, is to really learn how to do to hear that personal criticism without being defensive. And so one of the things I've been doing for the past 30 years is developing a course that I'm now putting on Zoom that will be available to people in poor communities for free, and will be available to other people for a very small price. And so I feel that if we want to take the boy crisis and work backwards, or take the best thing we can do for any single mom or any single dad is to have them understand that they're always going to be the parent of their children, and that even though they aren't going to love or have sex with each other again, it is crucial for them to get the best communication skills possible, not only for each other, but for what the children pick up about it being safe to communicate and have differences. And that's number one. Number two is that the father and mother, in the Boy Crisis book, as you know, I have the 4 must-dos of divorce. And one of those 4 must-dos is mothers and fathers having an equal amount of time with the children. And that sounds like you've worked out. Number 2 is being within about 20 minutes drive time from each other, so children don't resent. Do you have that happen?
We've got 7 minutes between us.
Wonderful. And that's so for people who don't have that, the reason that that's so important is because children start resenting going to the other parents if they have to give up going to a recital, or losing their opportunity to play on the soccer team or the football team or whatever, and so the rugby team. And so that's crucial. Number 3, and perhaps the most important, is that the children are not able to detect any bad mouthing from dad to mom and mom to dad. Number 4 is that the parents attend couples communication counseling or relationship counseling consistently, at least once every 3 or 4 weeks, when there is not an emergency, so that the parents can each have time to pick up the best intent of the other person's parenting style, rather than an emergency. Everyone's trying to persuade everyone what to do too quickly, and you don't have a chance to go into the underlying best intent of the other person. Now, if you're in a position of not being able to have the father involved, that the father is absolutely hopeless and so on. First of all, before you assume that hopelessness will remain hopeless, remember what I said about the prison population. These were guys that even they thought they were hopeless. And when men are told they're of value and they are needed, they come. That's when they come. When they feel like their parenting style is being criticized and demeaned and seen as being dangerous, they get out and they do something different, or they do something destructive. And so that's the first thing. The next thing is, if all hope is lost of getting the biological father re-involved, make sure you get your children involved in some equivalent of Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts, and a faith-based community. Whatever faith you are, the things I said before about involving them in a faith-based community is absolutely crucial. Get them involved in sports. Take a look at the Boy Crisis on the liberal arts of sports, the importance of pickup team sports, the importance of team sports that are organized, the importance of solo team sports that require self-starting, like tennis. Is it partly a team, but you're largely focused on doing something yourself, particularly in singles tennis. And so that those things are really important for people to do. Make sure the sport is, you encourage your child to be involved in a sport, not only that she or he is good at, but where there is a male coach that is a good male role model. A great male coach is a very important, can be a very important positive influence on the boy.
Wow. Thank you very much for that. When is the course likely to be available?
It should be available, if I don't do too many interviews, it'll be available in the next few months. I'm in the 3rd round of editing it now. And so I'd say by November, being realistic, it'll be available. If you drop me a note.
I will.
And if you and your partner,
really useful.
If you and your partner want to do a beta test of it, I can get it to you sooner. And
brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll
Good.
ask him.
Drop me a note about that, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Warren.
Absolutely.
Warren, neither Elizabeth nor I are religious, But we do see how boys without fathers active in their lives can sometimes benefit from belonging to faith-based communities, and perhaps groups such as the Scouts, where they'll find male mentors. Could you give us your thoughts on this area?
Yes, two things. One is the most important thing that is not understood is the research that on mentoring and then your son being a mentor. So boys who don't have fathers in particular, finding good male mentors for them, having them over for dinner, having them participate in what I call the family dinner night process that I outline in the Boy Crisis is really crucial. I'll spend a minute on that family dinner night process. Almost every problem that I came up in the book, I saw that family dinner nights were potential extremely useful ways of working on that problem. However, some family dinner nights can turn into family dinner nightmares. And so I created a structure in Appendix A of the book that was so important to me, that we had that every family understand how to do a family dinner night so it becomes the most important contribution to your son's or daughter's development. And number one is getting rid of electronics. And so I talk in that appendix about how to get rid of the electronics. Number two is making sure that every person at dinner time, and this family dinner night shouldn't be every night, it should be like once or twice a week. I mean, having dinner together should be as many nights as you can make it, but having this structured family dinner night should be once or twice a week. And then each parent, each person at the table takes maybe 2 minutes to share what has gone on with him or her, or what problems they're having, or whatever you decide to be the subject of that family dinner night. And but at the end of that 2 minutes, instead of going on to the next person, some other people at the table have a chance to say, Dad or Mom, what I heard you say was this. Did I distort anything? Did I miss anything? Is there anything, and then is there anything else you want to add within the next minute or so? And so what that does is allow everybody at the table, dad, mom, sister, brother, all to hear each other and make sure that they've heard each other, not with a mind to how I'm going to disagree or how to interrupt, but rather to let them know that I've completely understood them, and that if I haven't completely understood them, they will continue talking until I do. And so that makes it a very big incentive for us to move around that table effectively. So what happens with children like that is that they then feel that no matter what's going on inside of them, they have a chance to be heard accurately. While they're talking, mom or dad isn't beginning to fold arms and begin to feel like, oh, disapproving looks are in the face, and so that the child doesn't feel cut off. And so therefore there's a safe place. Then the family becomes what I call e pluribus unum, Latin for, of course, one from many. The family becomes one powerful unit that facilitates each person being unique and heard, no matter what their personality is. But each other person at the table has a chance to give their perspective on that issue, on that time. When you do this, I encourage you, particularly if you have sons, to not steer away from controversial issues. You want to talk about sex, you want to talk about rape, you want to talk about other political correctness or things like that. Boys will put down their electronics voluntarily if the discussion is exciting enough, because boys love to get in there. They love the full frontal. They like that controversy, but they don't like that controversy if they're going to be judged all the time that they're talking and feel like, when boys go, tell your dad, like, what the blank, that's a sign that they feel like it's just useless to tell your dad, to tell your mom. The only thing I'm going to get in response is a lecture. So why should I talk? I don't think. And so that's destructive. The other part of your question was on mentorship. Finding male mentors, particularly if your son does not have one. The Cub Scouts have done, do you have Cub Scouts in UK?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. The Cub Scouts have done extensive studies to find that the children that are in Cub Scouts for more than 2 years and attend meetings consistently, those are the two variables, they develop much better character traits. And I don't know any parent that wouldn't, more than anything else, want their children to be children of great character and good character. And so the character traits of children attending Boys Cub Scouts for 2 or more years are really shows statistically significant improvement. So I would encourage Cub Scouts. Number 2, Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts have deconstructed masculinity in one of the most positive ways. Boys respond, as we talked about before, very positively to positive rewards and stimulation. And the merit badge system does that. They respond to gathering together in ritual and having a community. Boy Scouts have done an ingenious job, whether consciously or not, I'm not 100% sure, of figuring out how to appeal to the best of masculinity. Next, I was mentioning mentorship a few times. Get male mentors in your life. If the coach is really a positive influence, invite him over for dinner. Introduce him to the family dinner night. Make him or other people, other males that you respect, part of that process. They'll love it, and the kids will love it. But more important than anything I've said, what the data shows is that having a male mentor is very helpful for a boy, but getting that boy someone to mentor, someone who's younger than him, who's not doing as well as he is, starts changing that boy's personality and sense of responsibility and purpose more than any other single thing, because the boy is now saying, should I complete my homework, or should I get involved in this new video game? And saying, well, if I don't complete my homework, I could do worse in school. And then if I do badly in school and the boy I'm mentoring sees I'm not doing well in school, I'm not a really good role model for him. So the incentive of being a good role model is like the boy is like what happens to men when we become parents. Suddenly all our self-centeredness and our narcissism and our immediate gratification starts going away, and we start being involved with postponed gratification because somebody else is looking up to us. And males and females need that enormously. It's why mothers, when I used to date between marriages, I started dating women with children, women without children. I soon gave up dating women without children because they were girls, they weren't women. It was only when women, males and females, have children that they become really adults who take on responsibility and start caring for somebody other than themselves. And you see this in every holiday card. If the person doesn't have children, it's I. And if the person does have children, it's my children, my children, my children. And so you see a totally different mentality.
Okay, thank you, Warren. Warren, I'd like to ask, we have a bit of time. I'd like to ask an additional question, unless you have one, Elizabeth, that you
No, not at the moment.
Okay. I don't think I've ever sort of said this on a sort of men's issues interview, but I'm a fan of American football. I just love it, and frankly, I enjoy it far more than soccer, and I will get such heat over that, but never mind.
We may want to edit this out. Yes.
Yeah. The only time I watch soccer is in the World Cup finals, because I mean that is exciting. But one of the fellow speakers at this conference is Professor Eric Anderson, who gave a talk at the 2018 conference. He's an American, but he teaches at the University of Winchester, and he's talking on something that he's very knowledgeable about, and I think you are too. I think I've heard that you are, which is brain injury from contact sports, and he's rather interestingly, I don't know if it's original, but has pointed that to as an additional men's issue, which I thought was rather fascinating. So I don't know if you have anything to say on brain injury because of course these contact sports tend to be compulsory for boys, but not for girls. So I wonder what you might have some thoughts on that.
Yes, I do. As you know, the subtitle of The Myth of Male Power is Why Men Are the Disposable Sex. And so we have basically trained men to be disposable And the football is one of the ways that we give men social bribes to be disposable. So that when I was in high school, the only part of me that really has any gifts is my legs, and I was a very good kicker. And so the coach wanted me to be a kicker, and my father said, no, you're not going to be involved in football because you're a kicker today. You're also a fast runner, those same legs, and sooner or later they're going to need somebody to catch a pass, and you're 149 pounds and 6'1". Some 300-pound boy is going to tackle you, and you're going to be wiped out, and you're going to be dealing with that for the rest of your life for a few minutes of fame. You're already student body president. Isn't that enough for you? This was his response. And so I didn't have a choice but to agree with, not to agree with him because I really wanted to do that. But what I found out later, and I suspected, my father suspected at the time, was that when you're hit as hard as that, not only is it bones that break, but there is potential damage to your brain as well. And now, in those days, that was not proven, but today it's really quite apparent. So I want to say a few things about football. First of all, the good news is football is one of the most ingenious sports. It's not coincidence that a smart person like yourself, Mike, is so interested in it. There are so many decisions that are being made every second in a different way. A quarterback has a play that is planned, so the strategy has to be mapped out and memorized. But at every second after that ball is given to the quarterback, somebody is likely to be blocked and somebody becomes free. Somebody is taken out, somebody is not taken out. And so that not only does the quarterback have to make within 1/10 of a second decisions about how to change the prescribed play, but everybody else on the team, that is the degree to which they adapt to that changing situation in 1/10 of a second, has to learn, either succeeds based on their ability to adapt or not. So there's a dozen other things that I talk about in the Boy Crisis book about the positive value of football. The solution is, now listen, I just talked about how negative it is. Now I'm talking about how positive it is. There's a solution. The solution is flag football. I went and attended the flag football championship here in San Francisco. I thought it was going to be boring compared to tackle football. It was in many ways more exciting because the field is larger. There are fewer people on the field, and there's all those same split-second decisions are required. All that same adaptation is required. The plays often last for longer. In football, in an hour's play, there's only 11 to 12 minutes of actual action. In flag football, the action moments are a higher percentage of that time. And so I was excited that the people that were with me were just cheering. The bond between the football players was just as strong. And so we have a solution to tackle football that will retain about 90% of the positive attributes of football and sacrifice very little. But the most important thing that it will not sacrifice is your son's brain's concussion. If you haven't looked at the data on football, take a careful look on that in the Boy Crisis book. It is overwhelming. It is no longer a controversy. Even the NFL is now behind this. I'm working with the Christian Men's Network and the NFL now to work on the importance of fatherhood and for them to model it, but also finally the American football managers have begun to acknowledge that there is a type of danger in this, and they've begun to move toward minimizing it, but still they're going with tackle, and they're still increasing the speed of the artificial turf, which makes it more exciting for people to watch, but it also makes it more dangerous for people when they conflict with each other. So football is training for male disposability. It's training for the social bribes that we give men to be disposable by calling them hero, by the cheerleader going, first and 10, do it again. The cheerleader, I ask you if you're a cheerleader or you have a daughter who's a cheerleader to say, when you say first and 10, do it again. You're saying to a boy, I'm going to love you. I'm going to be sexual with you. I'm going to cheer for you when you risk a concussion again. Is that the message you want to give to those boys?
Well, I look forward to the alternative form developing, Warren. Thank you. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
And I look forward to our next interview.
Me too, very much so. Very different for people who have watched this. We're going to do a very different take, but it's and so I think you won't find it to be repetitive.
Okay, Warren, thank you so much, and yeah, and that's a wrap.
Great. Good.